Hello. Hi. So we're having an interview with Dr. Nakisha Holder, who is an Associate Director of Licensing at Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures, focusing on life science technologies. Nakisha has a PhD from Johns Hopkins and is a certified licensing professional and is a patent agent with over 12 years of technology transfer experience. Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. So first question we have is what drew you to technical transfer?
Technology transfer was actually a field that came to me through a connection that I have. Her name is Nakisha Klingman, and she is Associate Director for Strategic Partnerships with FDA now. But at the time, she was actually working in the tech transfer office at NIH. And as we both were graduate students at Johns Hopkins, we would communicate. And she said, "Hey, this might be something that you might be interested in." And so what wound up happening was I took a course at the NIH. It was a class, a tech transfer class at NIH. And I found that this was absolutely something that was transformative to me. In the class, we learned about IP, commercialization, kind of the broad spectrum of what encompasses tech transfer. And I was really in awe of kind of this new thing that was different than my day-to-day laboratory experience, which I also loved, by the way. Um, from there, I wanted to learn more. So I joined Association for University Technology Managers, where I took some courses as well. And so again, those courses kind of led me to understand that I liked the business aspect of science as well as the deep science part of science. And I wanted an opportunity to be able to marry those two things together.
So, speaking of those courses, what did they prepare you to really do day to day?
So, what I do day to day is interact with faculty members so that we can understand the technology and its commercial potential. We interact with our intellectual property managers. So at Hopkins, technology transfer or management of technologies is done by two people. So you have the licensing manager who typically handles the business component of things, licensing, et cetera. And then you have the intellectual property manager who handles the strategic thoughts going into what we're going to file and interacting with our patent attorneys internally and externally. So interacting with our intellectual property managers so that we can plan strategically how we're going to protect our IP, if at all, and moving that process forward day to day. And finally, and I can think most importantly, interacting with our commercial stakeholders in an effort to both forge mutually beneficial relationships and foster development of the JHU technologies through the licensing of the intellectual property. Our goal, of course, is to bring the benefits of JHU technologies to the world. And so we establish kind of all of these relationships. I talked about faculty, internal with our patent group, as well as commercial stakeholders. We really need to establish relationships through meetings. And so I meet a lot. I meet with everybody multiple times. Our goal is to establish a relationship and establish trust. In order to facilitate these long-term projects, there has to be a level of trust, not only between myself and the commercial partner, but our faculty members and their research components at those commercial entities as well. So we also do evaluation and valuation of the technology. So we need to know what it is, whether or not it's patentable, and we need to know how valuable it is. What are the commercial markets that it's specifically going to fit into? And then identifying those or trying to identify those companies where we can create these relationships that I'm talking about. And again, all of this is to ensure continued support at research. So we're trying to license technology so that they can benefit the public, but we're also trying to generate revenue so that that revenue can go back to fostering more research done. So a good portion of that research revenue goes back into the laboratories. And so we're really proud to be able to help foster continued research. And then finally, it's about getting the deal done. And I talk about relationships because this whole business is about relationships. So we're trying to understand our potential partners' needs, understand their strategic development plan for the technology. We have to, again, understand the technology's value with respect to the company. And we need to, again, facilitate the establishment of relationships between the company and the faculty member, if they don't already have one. And again, all of this is about coming to mutually agreeable terms where the company can develop the technology.
Well, you've been very successful with that. Speaking of the start of that process, so what did you do to make yourself a competitive candidate when you did apply for this position?
Well, I think a lot of what I've discussed already has talked about what made me a competitive candidate. So again, I was introduced to tech transfer through a colleague. I took classes so that I can understand what tech transfer was about. And in taking those classes, you form relationships, you're increasing your network, you're meeting people who are in the field. I also joined Association for University Technology Managers, and that was really actually quite critical and pivotal in actually getting the position that I have here at Hopkins. So I joined Autumn, and I took an introduction to licensing course while I was still a postdoc at NIH. And in that effort, I learned about what I guess the tech transfer and licensing component of tech transfer does day to day. And I met a few people, and they encouraged me to apply. They said, if you don't apply and you don't network and get to know people, it's hard to um, enter the world of tech transfer. And 12 years ago, that was even harder, I think, than it is now. Um, it's a pretty close group, but I think they are broadening their capabilities because I think the term tech transfer, in its sense now, is broader than it was before. So before, tech transfer was the transfer of technologies from the bench to a commercial product. And now I think it's so much broader than that. It's not just university has a technology, tries to license it to company. It's more university has an asset and we're trying to partner it with a company. And that partnering could be through sponsored research in the laboratory. That partnership could be a sponsorship that ends up in a new or a new startup company that is funded by that company. Or it could be faculty has this great idea and they're interested in facilitating this technology in their own startup. So now it's gone from just technology from the laboratory gets licensed to a company for a product to now an economic system that's happening through development of the technology through a new company. And so, again, let me go back to Autumn. I joined Autumn and began a network. And I began applying for positions. I applied for positions at all of my local tech transfer offices, whether or not I was qualified. This is a huge thing for me. Again, sometimes it's about getting your name. And in my situation, I applied for positions that unfortunately I wasn't qualified for. But because I applied, my resume was viewed by someone who thought I might um, be qualified for a position that was lower than the position that I applied for, and it was a wonderful opening for me. At the time, I was just looking for an entrance into tech transfer, and I was afforded that opportunity. Um, so, and I would say now, even though this wasn't something that I could do, contact your local tech transfer offices and ask to be put on their mailing lists. If you are local and they're having events, many of the tech transfer offices are facilitating events related to startups, related to meet corporate partners, meet large pharmaceutical representatives, et cetera. Having these conversations and being in the space with them so that you can meet them, they see your face, they hear your name repeatedly, can facilitate opportunities that perhaps you hadn't thought about. And so putting yourself out there is something that I highly encourage, but avoid being too pushy such that people don't view you as a little bit too aggressive. So balance putting yourself out there with being too aggressive.
Also, practice, practice, practice. It seems.
Absolutely. Practice, practice, practice is definitely something that is helpful. And these are kind of like pseudo interviews. I mean, when you talk to people, they'll remember you. And if you are engaging and someone that they felt could be helpful, your name might come up a year down the line, 6 months down the line. Hey, I met this person at this event and they struck me. And therefore, they might be a perfect candidate for a position that we hadn't even had on our radar a year ago. But now it's opening up. Let's reach out and see if we can find that person.
So it seems like you do have a lot of good advice for people, but um, do you have any additional advice that you might want to suggest? If you could go back in time, what would you tell younger you?
I would definitely tell younger me to not be afraid to venture out and do new things sooner. I tend to be risk averse. And so, because I'm risk averse, I tend to continue to do the things that are comfortable. But it's not until you become uncomfortable that you become better at things that you didn't think you could do. So, be willing to take that risk and to get out there. It's super important. And so, I would tell my younger self to not be afraid to venture out of the laboratory sooner.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful opportunity to speak with you. Do you have any additional little nuggets of wisdom?
I don't think I have any additional parting words. I would wish everyone good luck and remember networking is key. So I guess I do have an additional nugget.
There
Network
you go.
key. And feel free to reach out to try and identify a mentor in the field that would be willing to help you.
Thank you very much. And again, this is Dr. Nakisha Holder, and we thank you very much for coming and very much for doing the interview with us.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.